Welcome back. Today, we're looking at a piece of political commentary from Tanashi Peter that argues white liberal women are dismantling American democracy.
Yeah, it's a very fiery piece. It uses viral clips, some pretty heavy theology, but there are a few structural choices that are, I think, holding it back from its full potential.
Let's get right into it. The first thing that really jumps out to me is how the piece handles evidence. It sets up these huge, elaborate hypotheticals instead of just sticking to the facts.
That's the first hurdle, isn't it? The segment relies so heavily on these detailed what-if scenarios that it actually weakens the impact of what really happened.
You're talking about the part with Mary Connie, the 63-year-old woman in Maine who interfered with police?
Exactly. The commentary spends, a huge amount of time on this made-up world where the police are running a sting operation to save a grandchild from literal kidnappers.
And it's a vivid image.
It is, but think about what that does. The audience knows that didn't happen. So right away, the argument is drifting into this kind of fantasy land.
It dilutes the gravity of the real event.
It completely dilutes it. What she actually did, disorderly conduct, obstruction during a felony stop, that's serious. But when you put it next to this cinematic kidnapping plot, it suddenly feels, boring.
It's almost like the creator didn't trust the real story to be compelling enough.
That's it, exactly. And the weakness there is that it gives skeptics an easy way out. They can just say, well, there were no kidnappers, so you're just mad about a movie you made up in your head.
So the suggestion is to focus on what's real.
Yes, focus on the tangible, real-world consequence. Don't invent these cinematic stakes.
So how do you do that? How do you make a felony stop feel as high stakes as a kidnapping without, making things up?
You lean into what's already there. The police report, it says her actions created a risk to officers.
Okay.
That phrase right there, risk to officers, that's terrifying if you just unpack it.
Right.
Forget the kidnappers. Just explain what happens when an officer has a weapon drawn and someone blows an air horn. That split-second distraction, that's where people get killed. That's real life and death stuff. You don't need to invent a grandchild for that.
And he even mentions something, an Old Town event in one of the clips, but it just flies by.
It does, and that's another missed opportunity. Ground the argument in that. Say, you want to know the consequences? Look at what happened in Old Town. Now you're using history, not fantasy. The argument becomes almost unassailable because you're pointing to actual scars, not, ghosts.
That's a great distinction. Okay, let's shift gears a bit to the more satirical side of this. The piece has this really creative metaphor, the founding mothers.
The concept is brilliant. It's a fantastic hook. But the execution, well, that brings us to our second point, the construction of the metaphor itself.
I laughed at the premise, I'll admit, but then it gets dark so fast. The founding mothers' constitution includes things like, mass slaughter of infants and chemical castration.
It goes from 0 to 100 immediately. And the problem is, it relies on a caricature that's going to limit how persuasive it is to anyone who isn't already completely on board.
A straw man.
It's a total straw man. It energizes the base, sure, but it simplifies these really complex political disagreements into cartoon villainy. If you're a moderate or even a liberal watching this, and the first thing you hear is that your side wants chemical castration, you're just going to tune out.
You're not debating them anymore. You're debating a monster you created.
Exactly. And look, this isn't about playing nice. It's about being effective. The suggestion here is to steelman the opposing view before you tear it down.
Steelmanning. So you make their argument as strong as you possibly can before you attack it.
Right.
How would that actually look in the script? Let's take the transgender rights point.
Okay, so instead of jumping straight to chemical castration, you start by acknowledging their own logic. You could say something like, these founding mothers would create a First Amendment of absolute autonomy, where your right to alter your body is the supreme law, no matter your age or the consequences.
I see. That actually sounds like something an activist might say.
It does. And then you pivot. You say, and the result of this so-called absolute autonomy is the permanent sterilization of confused children. You see the difference?
Yeah, you've acknowledged their logic and then shown where you think it leads.
And that's way harder to dismiss than just shouting an insult at them from the very beginning.
It forces the listener to follow your reasoning. It would be the same for the abortion point, I'm guessing.
Precisely. Don't start with mass slaughter. Frame it in their term, absolute reproductive freedom. Then you explain why, in the creator's view, that's the antithesis of motherhood. By the time you use those really heavy words, the audience has walked a path with you to get there.
That's a much more sophisticated approach. Now, speaking of the flow, We go from these high-level ideas to suddenly watching shaky cell phone footage.
Yeah. And that's where the rhythm gets a little bumpy. That transition between the high-level commentary and the reaction videos feels disjointed.
I really felt that. We're in this deep theological discussion about strangers versus invaders, and then boom, we're watching a woman scream at the police that they're kidnapping people.
And the setup for the clip is minimal. It's just, I think this is the best example. And then you're thrown into a street. You have no analytical lens. You're watching chaos.
So what's the fix for that? The footage is what it is.
You fix it in the setup. You have to prime the audience. Tell them exactly what behavior to look for in the clip that proves the point you just made.
Okay, so give me an example for that clip with the woman shouting kidnapping.
Before you play it, you say something like, now watch how this person redefines standard law enforcement as a crime to justify her interference. She doesn't see an arrest. She literally hallucinates a kidnapping.
That changes everything. Now I'm not just watching some random person yelling, I'm watching a specific psychological phenomenon in real time.
You've turned the clip into evidence for your thesis, and you do the same thing for the other clip, the one with the black conservative woman who intervenes.
Right.
Don't just show a fight, frame it. You could say you're about to see what happens when the logic of the real world collides head-on with the fantasy world of the activist. Then you play the clip. It makes the footage work for you.
It weaves everything together much more tightly. But speaking of weaving things together, there is a huge genre shift in this piece we need to address. Politics to theology.
That is the elephant in the room. The abrupt shift from political commentary to what is essentially a direct religious sermon. It alters the whole genre of the piece. It's confusing.
It really felt like two different shows. The first part is political satire, Kamala Harris, voting habits, immigration policy. And then the last third is a direct call to repentance, with talk of demonic sisterhoods and Yeshua.
It's jarring. And the weakness there is that the call to action, which is repentance, feels disconnected from the hook, which was political anger.
Yeah.
If I'm a secular conservative just watching for the political commentary, I might feel a little bait and switched when the sermon starts. It feels like the analysis just stopped and the preaching began.
But clearly that worldview is central to the creator's point. We can't tell him to just strip his faith out of it.
Oh, not at all. That worldview is his strength. The suggestion is to weave it in from the beginning. Don't save it all for a big reveal at the end.
So sprinkle the breadcrumbs earlier?
More than that, build the foundation with it. For instance, he brings up the concept of suicidal empathy from Dr. God Saad.
Right.
That is a perfect match for his biblical distinction between a stranger and an invader. Put those two ideas together in the first 5 minutes, not the last 5. When you're talking about the open borders constitution, frame it right then as a spiritual failure, not just a policy one.
That makes a lot of sense. So by the time you get to the end, the mention of demons doesn't come out of left field. It feels like the logical conclusion.
Precisely. There's that graph he shows, the hockey stick of women's political radicalization. It's a great visual. Link that immediately to the spiritual void he mentions later. Say something like, you see this vertical line on the graph? That's what a spiritual void being filled by political ideology looks like.
Ah.
If you plant those flags early, the call to repentance at the end feels like the only possible solution to the problem you spent 20 minutes describing. It becomes one cohesive piece.
That integration is really key. Okay, one final point. We've been using this term white liberal women because the video does. But the video features Mary Connie, who's 63, and then young college kids screaming for Hamas, and then these hypothetical founding mothers.
And it treats them all as if they're the same person with the same brain. And this gets to our last point, which is about the clarity of definition.
The broad generalization just groups together all these really different behaviors, and it muddies the critique.
It really does. It assigns a single motivation, pure wickedness or whatever, to a huge diverse group of people. And when you just say this entire demographic is utterly insane, you stop analyzing why they believe what they believe.
And it makes the argument really easy to dismiss, doesn't it? If you know one person in that group who isn't insane, the whole thing falls apart.
Right. You lose all the nuance. The suggestion is simply to differentiate. Differentiate between the activist class like Mary Connie, who is physically obstructing police, and the much larger voting bloc, who are just supporting certain policy. Critique the ideology that connects them, but don't pretend they're all the same.
So how do you do that without losing the punch of the argument?
You can talk about different motivations. You could say the average voter might be driven by a kind of misguided compassion, but the activist on the street, that's driven by something else, maybe a desire for chaos. That distinction is critical.
And the age difference felt really significant to me, too.
It's huge. When you show that radicalization graph, ask the question out loud. Is a 63-year-old in Maine driven by the same things as a 20-year-old on TikTok? By treating them as different symptoms of the same disease, your diagnosis becomes more, well, clinical. It becomes precise, and a precise argument is a lot harder to dismiss than a sweeping generalization.
That word precision, that really sums up everything, doesn't it? The passion is there. The raw material is powerful. It just needs that laser focus.
Absolutely. He's a talented speaker with a very clear style. We don't want to change that fire. We just want to help aim it better.
So let's just recap the plan for the rewrite.
First, ground the arguments in reality. Drop the kidnapping fantasy and focus on the terrifying reality of the police report. Second, steelman the founding mothers' argument. Show their logic before you show how it leads to destruction.
Okay.
Third, prime your clips. Tell us what to look for before we see it. Fourth, weave the theology in from the beginning so the end feels earned. And finally, be more precise with your demographic. Differentiate the activist from the voter.
It's really about trusting the audience, isn't it? Trusting them to get the real stakes without needing a movie plot, and trusting them to follow a complex argument.
That's it. If you treat your audience like they're smart, they'll listen. Treat them like they need a puppet show, they'll eventually tune out.
Tinashe, you have a really strong voice and a provocative thesis. With just a few of these structural tightenings, this piece could go from a powerful rant to a genuine revelation. We're excited to see what you do with it.
Definitely. The potential is massive.
Thank you for trusting us with your work. Submit the next draft when you're ready, and we'll get back in the lab. Until then, keep writing
and keep refining.